So y'all, I'm originally from Atlanta, but I'm a little bit of a mutt because I've lived everywhere, but Nashville has become home. That's where I've been over the last decade. I have encountered the Lord there over and over and over again. And sometimes you get kind of attached to a place because it's the closest maybe you've ever felt to heaven. You get a little glimpse of the glory that we're made for. Maybe some of you feel that way about your own hometowns. There's this great hymn by Blessed John Henry Newman called Lead Kindly Light. Some people think it's a hymn towards heaven. Well, it certainly is a hymn of longing for heaven. But when he first wrote it, he was just homesick for England. That was it, a longing for home. All of us are made for glory. We're made for the limitless love that we were actually created from. The limitless love of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. What an amazing mystery that we were made in the image of a God who is a furious love affair, to borrow a phrase from G.K. Chesterton. He is tremendous love in himself. How many of you can say that the deepest desire in your heart is to love and be loved? Anybody agree with that tonight? Do you ever wonder why that's the case? Could it be the case that we're made in the image of a communion of love? The Father and the Son gazing upon one another is so powerful, is so beautiful, is so real that it spirates. That's a fancy theological phrase. I don't know how else to use it, but it spirates, and that's the Holy Spirit, the gaze of love between the Father and the Son. It's what we're made for, and anything short of it doesn't satisfy. We're made for limitless glory. Limitless love, because it's where we came from. The first time I probably began to think about this was, well, about 6 months of age in this particular bathtub. You can pull up the image now. That's actually an award-winning picture coming up right there. My great-grandfather took it, and it ended up in all these magazines, and my family has had a kick out of it ever since. How many of you guys remember being loved well by your parents at a young age? Can you remember that? The first really strong memory was probably in 4th grade when I started playing football. Any football players out there? Any jocks? It's a few of you. It's a few of you. And in 4th grade, I can tell you the last thing I wanted to do was strap on pads and throw my body into other people. It seemed like an absolutely absurd idea, but my dad was like, Jimmy, you got to try it. You got to give it all you've got. And so I went to practice, and I would come home with snot stains, and I'd have blood stains on different parts of my body, and I was basically still weeping from the pain of it all, the confusion of it all. I don't know why they think you should put on pads at 4th grade. That should be at least like two-hand touch or flag football. But by 3 weeks into this, I was ready to quit. And my dad said, Jimmy, don't give up. He kept quietly prodding me, don't give up. Eventually, you're going to like the game of football. Eventually, you're going to play your first game. You're going to get some tougher skin, and you're going to become a man, and it's going to help you grow in virtue. I said, all right, whatever, Dad. And I felt pressure to go back my 5th grade year, my 6th grade year. By the time I was in 7th grade, I was at a brand new Catholic school. For the first time, I sort of knew what I was doing more than everybody else out there on the field, and it felt really good. Sort of boosted my confidence because in 6th grade, I was bullied. In 6th grade, I was the new kid at a K-8 Catholic school, and everybody had grown up together, gone together to school since they were in kindergarten, and I was the new kid. I didn't make a single friend that year except Chase Oliver, this really awesome guy who invited me over to his 6th grade birthday party. One day, I'm going to thank him for that. We stayed up late into the night playing Nintendo 64, WWE. Anybody know what I'm talking about here? By the way, now in hindsight, with a little bit more age and wisdom, I think video games are like the biggest waste of time ever. I'm probably just insulted like 30%, 50% of the room. But at the time, it was everything to me, so we pulled an all-nighter, the first all-nighter of my entire life in the 6th grade. Every other moment of that year was miserable. And I would come home crying, and my mom would comfort me there at the kitchen table. And with enough time and enough patience, and enough of my mom's love, I got through that year. And the Lord began transforming my heart. Because by the time I was a freshman in high school, 14 years old, I really encountered the Lord. I understood him for the first time as a good shepherd. That's what this first talk tonight is about. Understanding Jesus Christ, the good shepherd. And I'm kneeling on a concrete floor in the North Georgia mountains with about 30 of my closest friends. It's freezing, by the way. And Psalm 46 is being sung in the background. Be still and know that I am God. And for the first time in my life, I realized that God is God and I am not. And it's a game-changing moment for me at age 14. It led to a deepening of conversion that has been unfolding ever since. So what does it mean to believe that Jesus Christ is the Good Shepherd? I'm going to roll a clip from Captain America, the first one. Hope you enjoy this.
Ladies, come on. My grandmother has more life in her, God rest her soul. Move it!
You're not really thinking about picking Rogers, are you?
I wasn't just thinking about it. It's a clear choice.
When you brought a 90-pound asthmatic onto my army base, I let it slide. I thought, what the hell, maybe it'd be useful to you, like a gerbil. Never thought you'd pick him.
Up! Jumping jack.
Stick a needle in that kid's arm, it's gonna go right through him.
Come on, girls.
Look at that. He's making me cry.
I am looking for qualities beyond the physical.
Do you know how long it took to set up this project? All the grubbling I had to do in front of Senator What's-His-Name's committees?
Yes, I know. I am well aware of your efforts.
Then throw me a bone. Hodge passed every test we gave him. He's big, he's fast, he obeys orders, he's a soldier.
He's a bully.
You don't win wars with niceness, Doctor. You win wars with guts. Grenade! Get away! Get back!
The dummy grenade. All clear. Back in formation.
Is this a test?
He's still skinny.
That right there, we're going to stop it right there, is one of my favorite scenes of all the Marvel films. Because in an instant, we can see the humility and the love of Captain America, the sacrificial love. What does it mean to believe that Jesus is the Good Shepherd? It means he's going to jump on the grenades of our life that would otherwise destroy us, that would otherwise wreak havoc in our lives and in our souls. One of the most powerful ways I've ever seen that happen was exactly 5, maybe 6 years ago now, when my brother, who had been away from the church for almost 10 years, went off to college, entered into young adulthood, and more or less abandoned his Catholic faith. He would go to Mass once, maybe twice a year. He was working for IBM at the time, Monday through Thursday, traveling as a consultant, worked out of his home office on Fridays. At the time, I was living this really fun, very beautiful, but very simple life as a missionary. And he saw the joy that he longed for every time we talked on the phone or got together over holidays. And this one spring day, I happened to be in Atlanta. It's a Friday. I get a phone call from my brother who lives about 5 minutes down the road from where I am at that particular moment. He says, Jimmy, I've got to tell you something. And you're the only person who'd believe me, but I got to tell you in person, can you come over to my apartment? So I make the 5-minute drive, drop everything, because Bobby's never asked me something so humble and vulnerable before. As I pull in and walk into his apartment, I can tell that he's visibly upset. He even looks sick. He's sitting there on a chair, refuses to look up. He has his head in his hands like this. And he begins to tell me about this dream, better yet, a nightmare that he had just woken up from. And he said in that nightmare there was an army of evil spirits hovering around him, suffocating him. He said it was the most painful experience of his life. And just towards the end, when he was about to give in to despair and lose all hope, he said there was an army of good spirits. He said, Jimmy, I could see you, and I could see Haley, our sister, and I could see Mom on the front lines of those good spirits, fighting off the evil ones one by one. And so when I woke up and y'all weren't with me, I immediately started crying. And then the images of the evil spirits returned, and I got sick to my stomach. I couldn't stop vomiting. And that was about the time that I called you. For my brother to even use language like this, good spirits, evil spirits, it didn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't like him to talk like that. And over the next 45 minutes, we just went back and forth in prayer and in conversation, and ultimately decided it was as if God the Father had given Bobby a glimpse into the state of his soul that day. And 3 different times I sort of quietly mentioned, hey, you might feel a lot better if you went to confession. It was like real simple, kind of snuck it in there. And towards the very end of the conversation, he goes, I think I'm going to go to confession. I think I might feel better. I said, I think that's a great idea. Let me see if I can get a priest friend of mine on board. And sure enough, within 5 minutes, a priest had texted me back and said, meet me in the back of the parish. I'll be there waiting for your brother. 10 minutes later, we're in the back of that parish. Bobby walks in. About an hour later, walks out. Looks like he's floating 3 inches off the ground. He had become a child again, with joy, with purity. He realized who he was. He realized that he was made in glory, that he was a beloved son of God the Father, at least for a moment. And he was able to celebrate that. So sure enough, the prodigal had returned home, so I seemed appropriate to go out for a steak dinner, and we did. And it was good. My brother died 3 years later of a drug overdose, about 3.5 years ago today. He fell back into a lot of those same addictions. And you might wonder, how can I still look at God, at Jesus as a good shepherd in light of that suffering? Well, here it is. I am the good shepherd. I know mine, and mine know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I will lay down my life for the sheep, just like Captain America laying down his life for his brothers. I am the gate, Jesus says. Whoever enters through me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The more my family has wrestled with this great tragedy, the more miracles that have unfolded since Bobby's passing, the more we have entered into that narrow gate and found pasture. I'm telling you, Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And I know that to be true because what he has done in the lives of my family members since my brother's passing, what he's done in my own life. 7 months after his passing, I found myself back in the North Georgia mountains, this time very close to Cove Crest, for those of you who have been there. And there's 250 teens in adoration. And I'm realizing for the first time that I'm still bitter towards Bobby. There's unforgiveness in my heart. And I begin to pray about that in the midst of the Lord's presence and adoration. I see these 2 young men. The older one has his hand over the shoulder of the younger one. He's clearly interceding for him. I barely, in an audible voice, hear him say, I love you, brother. Words I never heard growing up, but words that spoke healing and truth over my heart in that moment. Before I knew it, there was a hand on the back of my shoulder that night. I never turned around to see who it was, but a few days later, a chaperone walks up to me. He says, Jimmy, that was my hand interceding for you in adoration a few nights ago. I think the Lord wants you to know something. He wants you to know that your brother is proud of you, that he loves you, and to make sure that from this point forward, I call you Jimbo. And it was a wave of healing, a wave of forgiveness. And Jimbo's like a family nickname, by the way. No one else would have known it, all right? And the Lord worked a miracle in my heart that night. He brought resurrection. I felt closer to Bobby than I had ever felt to him during his earthly life. Jesus is a good shepherd because the cross leads to the resurrection. Suffering always leads to joy. And I don't know what you bring to the table tonight, but I promise you Jesus is a healer. I promise you the Father in heaven is sovereign. I promise you the Holy Spirit is the great, tremendous lover of your souls. So let's enter in. Let's be surprised by God's limitless love and glory this weekend.